Too much of our rubbish is going into landfill sites, according to the European Union. It's threatening to fine local councils who don't cut the amount that they bury. News 24's Nick Hyam has had the rather nice job of checking out one of the alternatives. He's at a compost plant in Dorset. Nick, it's over to you.
Thank you, Hugh. Yes, I'm just outside Wimborne in Dorset, learning how we're becoming cleverer generally about dealing with our rubbish. Every year in England, we chuck out around 25 million tonnes of household rubbish. That's 513 kilos per person, and two-thirds of it is just dumped in holes in the ground. They call it landfill, but England's 2,000 landfill sites are filling up, and they produce methane, which is one of the more dangerous of those famous greenhouse gases that lead to global warming. And now, as you say, the European Union is threatening to fine local councils who don't produce the amount they send to landfill. So pressure's on to find alternative ways of dealing with our rubbish. Around 9% of it is now incinerated, usually in small power stations. Just under a quarter is either recycled or composted, as here. The waste industry says the country needs to spend around £10 billion on hundreds of new facilities to treat our waste. Well, I mentioned landfill and methane. This plant I'm in is right next door to a landfill site. They're tapping off the methane. Just next door to me is a small shed, a white shed. Doesn't look much, but it is in fact a power station generating about 7 megawatts of electricity, enough to power a town like Poole, just off methane. Another way of dealing with the waste, well, that's composting it. That's a great pile of composting household waste, unsorted over there. You can turn it into soil and this stuff, which is basically plastic. Now, how do they do that? Well, earlier today we filmed one of the local council trucks from Bournemouth delivering a load of rubbish here to this plant. And what they do is they sort it, and the really big stuff gets chucked at an early stage, but the rest of it is shredded and put down into a big compost hall. They don't add anything to it, they just put in air and water. And otherwise, the natural bugs take care of everything else. It's all done in an enclosed space with a roof. They take the noxious vapours, not that it's very smelly, but they take the vapours off and put them through a filter so that the neighbours don't complain, and they produce soil which you can put on farms and gardens, and they produce various other offshoots which can either be recycled, like that plastic we saw, or can be put in landfill. Every so often they put this thing through the great piles of compost. They sit here for about a month, and that turns it over, and all of that heat, steam you can see, is simply the bugs working in the compost. They're all generating temperatures in the middle there of up to 70 or 80 degrees. And it comes charging through here, making a frightful racket. All of that steam that you can see gets pumped off, and ultimately there is money to be made out of selling this sort of stuff to farms and gardens, though frankly most of the money here is made, I got too close to it, you almost certainly can't hear me, most of the money here is made out of the fees that local councils pay to use this facility. So there you are, Hugh. Every year in England we produce about 25 million tonnes of household waste. That's 516 kilos per person, or around 6 or 7 times my body weight. Now, until recently, almost all of it went straight into holes in the ground. Landfill, they called it. But Britain's 2,000 landfill sites are filling up, and what's more, the European Union disapproves of such a wasteful practice. So we're having to get cleverer in dealing with our household waste, and this is one way. I'm here at a composting centre outside Wimborne in Dorset, and that, believe it or not, started life about a month ago as ordinary household waste in people's dustbins and black bags and wheelie bins, and it's been composted. All the organic matter has broken down, and as you can see, there are left bits of plastic and so on and so forth. Now, a little earlier today we filmed a Bournemouth council rubbish lorry delivering stuff to the front end of this facility here, where it's initially sorted. The big stuff, things like glass and bricks and so on, is filtered out. All the small stuff falls down into a great pile inside the main composting hall here in this composting centre. And what then happens to it is that it's piled up what is called a windrow process. There's all sorts of stuff in here: food, garden rubbish, plastics, bits of wood, old potatoes, old shampoo jars and so on and so forth. And it's piled up into these great steaming piles for about a month. And here to talk about that is Roy Osborough from Bournemouth Council. That was one of his rubbish lorries. Now, councils, Roy, are under real pressure, aren't they, to do more of this recycling and this composting?
Well, we've certainly been given a very, very stiff challenge by the government to get our act together, more so than perhaps we have in the past, yes.
And if you don't, what happens?
We face significant levels of fines, for one thing. Theoretically, I suppose the government could actually send the inspectors in to take over the service if everything else failed.
And we're talking about fines of £150 a tonne of waste sent to a landfill site, in excess of the limit set for each council. That could amount to millions of pounds, couldn't it?
Well, yes, it could indeed, which is why the option of doing nothing isn't an option.
So, what about places like this? Are they the answer?
They're part of the answer, certainly, but not the answer in and of themselves. They are part of a chain of solutions, if you will, which includes recycling, waste minimisation, and, of course, what you do with the stuff you can't recycle.
Now, one of the things they offer to do here is recycle unsorted household rubbish. Is that a good idea?
I personally think that, as I said, it is part of a solution. But what we've got to be careful about here is offering a solution which seems to take the responsibility away from householders. We should be challenging householders.
You want householders to sort their own rubbish, to be conscious of how much they're producing?
That's exactly right, yes.
All right, Roy Osborough, thank you very much indeed. This facility is actually right next to an old landfill site, nearly full. And one of the things they're doing here, another way of getting value out of our waste, is pumping off the methane gas from that landfill site. And there's actually a small power station here burning off that methane gas, generating around 7 megawatts of electricity, enough to power a small town like Pools. Until a few years ago, virtually all the household rubbish we produced in this country was simply tipped into holes in the ground, landfill they called it. But now the government and the European Union want us to get much cleverer about what we do with our rubbish. Otherwise, it's simply a wasted resource. So local councils are being told if they go on tipping as much as they have done into landfill, they'll face heavy fines. Instead, they're being told to recycle or compost much more of their waste. So this is one of the places it ends up. A month ago, this was ordinary household waste in black bags. You can see it's a great mix of stuff. There are tin cans, crisp packets, all sorts of odds and sods. For the last month, it's been rotting down. All the food waste and the vegetable content has been turned into compost, and that'll be separated out into all its constituent parts. And one of the things that it produces at the end is this, which is basically waste plastic. This is all part of a composting facility just outside Wimborne in Dorset. Bill Riddle runs the company that owns it. Bill, what do you produce at the end of all this process?
Well, with the plastic we can produce either a lightweight aggregate or send it back into the recycling industry for them to use, or we can produce a diesel fuel out of the plastic. The soil that comes out would be used for farmers to use as a fertilizer replacement to grow energy crops, or for landfill remediation, soil remediation.
Now, this is an experimental plant in essence. You're hoping to build lots of these, and you're bidding for contracts from local authorities all around the country who are being told that they must compost more. Are we going to see an explosion in composting?
Yes, I think so. With this, you don't need such sophisticated collection facilities, and there is, with the newer system, probably the need for up to 200 of these plants in the UK by 2010.
Okay, now next door, in the chamber next door, you've got some active composting going on. Now this is great piles of basically sewage, sludge and garden waste in this particular case mixed up. You can see they're steaming. Interestingly, they're not smelling much, though that's about to change, I think. And this stuff, this is a rather better kind of compost which can be turned into stuff that you can sell to farmers. Now down at the far end, we've got a great big machine. What's that doing?
That machine turns the waste up to 3 times a week, so that any materials on the outside gets pulled to the inside, so everything is treated exactly the same over the 4-week period.
Okay, and once that starts up, I'm told we've got to get out of here pretty smartish. So let's get Stuart to start that up. And the advantage of this, what's the outcome?
The outcome, this room will fill with steam in a moment, but you know the waste it proves that it's active. We're a dynamic process.
This is a sealed chamber. You extract all the gases that this stuff gives off, and you dispose of it cleanly, so there's no nasty smell.
There's no nasty smell outside. A biofilter deals with all smells, so you don't see huge heaps of steam or any smells or bioaerosols.
Okay, well there you have it, the future of waste disposal, the future of composting on a large, indeed industrial scale.